5:51 right now. Alzheimer's and dementia are devastating for the person, their family, and their friends, but avoiding three things may help prevent the disease. So here to tell us a little bit more is Dr. Jay Sorden of the Redwood Clinic. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and Nelson Mandela all are famous people who've had Alzheimer's. And 1 in 8 Americans has Alzheimer's. Most doctors think that dementia is just a natural aging process, but actually there are certain things that people can do to avoid Alzheimer's. Number one, I call the John Belushi. He was a comedian, obese, but obesity is not a laughing matter. The more fat you have in your body, the lower your brain mass, so the more obesity, the more your brain cells diminish. Okay. Number two, we call the Prince Charles, because it has to do with teeth. And so individuals' teeth, if you get inflammation and infection, it will go into the sinuses and eventually rot the brain. Not a good thing, so take care of your teeth. Very important. And number three, we call the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges used to hit each other and fall down and on, and they would trivialize these kind of injuries, but actually they accumulate over time. We've all heard of chronic traumatic encephalopathy that a lot of athletes and all get, and eventually that can lead to dementia, and it can lead to depression and sometimes suicide. So you want to avoid these damaging blows to the head, as well as taking care of those with things like acupuncture and neurologic relief center technique.
Okay, so there are things that you can do locally, so we need to go to the dentist.
That's right.
And you said acupuncture and things. Talk to us about some of the signs, the first signs of dementia.
Sure. Well, one of the first signs is like forgetting the names of your pet or other people around you. So I have what's called Dr. J's brain formula. It's not a product, but it's actually a mnemonic. So a pneumatic, which is B stands for blood circulation. You have to make sure you keep your blood circulating to your brain properly. R stands for removing toxins, such as heavy metals and other things in the body that degenerate the nervous system. A stands for avoiding sugar. Many people don't realize it, but Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes because it's associated with too much blood sugar. I is inflammation and infection. We want to reduce those to keep the brain from degenerating. And N stands for names. It's really important to practice remembering people's names when you first meet them, because it uses all different parts of the brain, different associative areas, and so that keeps the brain wide awake.
Okay, something that we all need to do. Some very good advice this morning, things to keep in mind because it is a very devastating thing for families.
Absolutely, it is.
Welcome back, 6:51 right now. Alzheimer's and dementia are devastating for the person, their family, and their friends, but avoiding three things may help prevent the disease. And here to tell us more is Dr. Jay Sorden of the Redwood Clinic. Thanks for coming in.
Holly, as you know, both Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, and Nelson Mandela, all are famous people who've had Alzheimer's. 1 in 8 people in the United States is going to end up with Alzheimer's, and that just really kills me to think of that as a statistic. So there are three things that people can do to avoid Alzheimer's. Number one, we call the John Belushi, and that is to try to reduce obesity, because obesity is a ticking time bomb for dementia. The more fat you have, the smaller your brain gets because it diminishes and it degenerates. Number two, we call the Prince Charles. You know, some people think he has really bad teeth. And so inflammation and infection of the teeth can actually lead to sinus problems, and then it can actually spread to the brain and cause what's called leaky brain syndrome, where the brain actually degenerates because of stuff getting into it. The third one we call the Three Stooges. The Three Stooges used to have a lot of slapstick kind of comedy, and they would hit each other in the head and stuff. And actually the brain, here, why don't you hold the brain there? Okay. If the brain gets jostled a lot, then it can damage what's called the meninges, which surround the brain. It's sort of like taking this bottle and going like that. That is the impact of a 15-mile-an-hour car accident, which can really influence the brain and cause degeneration.
Okay. So three things, try to avoid them. Talk to us about signs and symptoms for folks that may be starting to experience this.
Absolutely. So if someone is having difficulty reading for a long period of time, they start falling asleep quickly, that's a sign. Another one is loss of sense of smell. And actually peanut butter going over toward the left nostril, if you can't smell that, it's an early sign of dementia. Very interesting.
That is interesting.
And so we have like something called the brain formula, which B stands for taking care of blood circulation. It's very important to do that to keep the brain oxygenated and get plenty of nutrients so it works well. R stands for removing toxins. Fat contains lots of toxins, and it's important to clear those toxins out of the body so it doesn't kill the brain cells. Okay. A stands for avoiding sugar. Now, sugar is a diabetes that's associated with that, and Alzheimer's is called type 3 diabetes because it's so interrelated with sugar and overproduction of sugar that's damaging the brain. Third is I, standing for inflammation. All kinds of inflammation can damage the brain. And fourth, or N, stands for names. And so remembering people's names is a process that goes through all parts of the brain. And so it actually helps to integrate different parts of the brain. So if we practice remembering people's names, like yours, Holly, then it will, in later years, we'll be able to draw on that power, and our memory powers will be strengthened over time.
So something simple that you can do to start.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks so much. Very interesting things, and of course something that we want to focus on trying to prevent because it is very devastating for folks.
That's right. It is terrible.